Hello, everybody. Have you ever had the experience of feeling good about something until you found out what was going on with somebody else, and then you didn't feel so good anymore? For instance, I found out while working on this message that our generation gets more vacation time than anyone ever before in the history of our country. Average American gets 4 weeks vacation a year. That's highest in our country's history ever. I heard that, and I was feeling pretty good until I found out that in Germany, the average person gets 10 weeks a year. Then guess how I was feeling? Yeah, I'm moving to Germany. That's how I was feeling. Or for instance, let's say that a friend of yours who has this really nice lake house up in Door County tells you that you can borrow it for your vacation this summer. Which, let's say it's someplace that you always wanted to go or someplace you liked going. Feels pretty good, right? Until you find out that their place in Wisconsin is available because they're going to Tahiti for a month this summer. Then how would you feel? Right. Okay, one more. Let's say that I had the pleasure of informing you that you're going to be getting a totally unexpected bonus at work this week of $5,000. Yeah, I know, right? Gotta love that. Then you get to work on Monday and find out that your coworker, who has similar numbers to yours and hasn't been with the company as long, is getting $10,000. Then how would you feel? Today we're wrapping up our series called I Quit. It's about how, as hard as life can be, many times we make our lives harder than they have to be by our own reactions and responses to what's happening to us. In this series, we've been talking about saying I quit to certain things that with God's help are within our control. And when this happens, we can not so much be our own worst enemies. In week 1 of the series, we explored what it looks like to say, I quit, when it comes to living in fear. And last week, we talked about how it can help to say, I quit, when it comes to complaining. And this week, we're wrapping up with our need to say, I quit comparing. And I want to go there today by telling you a kind of strange story from within the larger story of the Exodus story in the Old Testament part of the Bible. I love how unvarnished the Bible is about the shortcomings of many of the heroes of the faith. And this story is like this. This story is about Moses, Charlton Heston, about Moses and his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. Now, most of us have heard of Moses, but Aaron and Miriam are major players in their own right. Aaron is the high priest. He's the second most influential guy among God's people. And Miriam, she's a prophetess, so she's easily the most influential woman among her people. So Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, they're on their way. They're leading the people of God toward the promised land. When along the way, listen what happens. Miriam and Aaron began to talk against Moses. They asked, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us? And the Lord heard this. At once the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, listen to my words. When a prophet of the Lord is among you, I reveal myself to him in visions. I speak to him in dreams. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And then it says, the anger of the Lord burned against them, and there stood Miriam, leprous like snow. Aaron turned towards her and saw that she had leprosy, and he said to Moses, please do not hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed. So Moses cried out to the Lord, oh God, please heal her. The Lord replied to Moses, confine her outside the camp for 7 days, and after that, she can be brought back. So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days because of the leprosy, and the people did not move on until she was brought back. Strange story, huh? But at the heart of the story is this thing that all of us tend to do that not only doesn't make our lives better, it makes our lives far worse. I mean, did you see in the story how Aaron and Miriam messed up here? There's an old saying, compare and despair. And that's what happened here. And I feel for them because it's really hard. It must have been really hard to have a younger sibling who's a bigger deal than you. I mean, Miriam and Aaron, they both had significant influence, but little brother Moses had more. Moses gets more respect, more kudos, more credit than they do. And it led to all sorts of strife and animosity because they compared. Now, apparently, they were both comparing, but Miriam was the instigator of the open rebellion against Moses. But it all started when Miriam and Aaron began to compare themselves to Moses. And you know, we all do it, don't we? A social psychologist I came across working on this talk writes, to be human is to compare ourselves with others. Another writer I found put it this way: if comparing were an illness, the whole world would be a hospital. Quick show of hands. Anybody here who's never done it, never compared themselves to someone else? And remember where liars go. Comparing. We do it with just about everything. We do it with our appearance. And I don't just mean, comparing our appearance to people we know. We compare how we look with people in magazines. I mean, for instance, ladies, does your hair look as soft and shiny as this? And guys, how do your abs and biceps look compared to this? I don't know why they keep covering my face when they shoot those pictures. I was talking to people I know about this comparing thing, and one of the biggest responses I got was from women who said they find themselves comparing kids, as moms. I mean, what do your kids have that my kids don't have? Or how are my kids doing in school compared to your kids? Or how many sports and activities are my kids in compared to yours? Sound familiar, moms? I mean, we compare everything. We all do. That's not just moms. We compare everything. We compare vacations. We compare cars. We compare clothes. We compare houses. Heck, I even compare smartphones, which I don't know where mine is right now, which is not a good thing. But check out this quote I found from Teddy Roosevelt, former President Teddy Roosevelt. He said, "Comparison is the thief of joy." The thief of joy. Great quote. Great quote. See, Miriam and Aaron compared themselves to their brother, and one of the things that stands out in the story is how seriously God took their comparing. I mean, we're told that the anger of the Lord burned against them. Now think about that. I mean, what is it about comparing that ignited that kind of response in God? Now, let's keep in mind, this is God's response to something going on among the primary leaders of the entire people of God. But it's really clear, nonetheless, that God's just not cool with comparing. And here's why I think that's so. First off, when I compare, I always lose. I mean, when I compare myself to someone else and I feel like I come up short, I lose. Comparing leads to devaluing my self-worth, denying the uniqueness that God made in me. And comparing leads to defeating the good work of God in my life sometimes. Even more than that, comparing robs me of joy and can lead me to resent others. I mean, when I compare myself to others and feel like I come up short, I always lose. But I also lose when I compare myself to people who have it worse than me. I mean, even if I'm better off by comparison, I lose when I compare because it sets me up for feeling superior and prideful. I mean, when I compare, if they have it better than me, I lose. If they have it worse than me, I lose. Bottom line, when I compare, I always. But I'm not the only one who loses when I compare. Others lose too. Comparing resulted in Miriam and Aaron resenting and rebelling against Moses. But it had consequences way beyond that. Look again at how this story about comparing ends. It says, so Miriam was kept outside the camp for 7 days because of the leprosy. And the people waited until she was brought back before they traveled again. See what's happening here? There's this community of hundreds of thousands of God's people traveling together through this harsh, barren wilderness. I mean, they're on their way toward the promised land that God had said He's going to give to them. And now the whole community has to come to just a screeching halt. They have to stop moving ahead for a whole week because Miriam and Aaron played the comparison game. and everybody's journey is put on hold for a whole week. I mean, do you think the people were thinking, sweet, whole week to sit around, play Frisbee, and work on my tan? I'm saying not so much. Comparing didn't just affect Miriam and Aaron, it affected everybody. Comparing is destructive to community, and it leads to resentment and isolation. It's true among us. I mean, when you look around in a community like ours, I mean, we have countless opportunities for comparing, don't we? I mean, there's people in this room who are more successful than you are and have more stuff than you do, right? I mean, if you're single, you can envy those who are married. If you're married, you can envy those who are single. I mean, people without kids can envy people who have kids, and people who have kids can envy the freedom of those who don't. I mean, we can even compare what God's doing in our lives when it comes to His mission compared to what He's doing in the lives of others. So many opportunities to compare. I mean, I struggle with this as a pastor guy. I compare myself to others in my line of work. Is their church more successful than ours? Does our church have more or less people than theirs? I mean, are we making more or less of an impact than their church is making? Am I better or worse as a speaker, than this person over here? Don't answer that, okay? Compare and despair. So, think about it. What lies at the core of all this comparing? To understand why it happens and also how we can combat it, we have to understand what's at the heart of it. At the core of comparing, I believe, is a failure to love. Because comparing is a major way to be self-centered. I mean, when I compare, it's all about me. How am I better off than that person? How am I not as well off as that person? I mean, what do they have that I don't have? What do I have that they don't have? Jesus said people would know we are His followers by our love for each other. But comparison isn't about love, it's about me. Comparing mars the thing that God and Jesus said is meant to be the defining mark of Christ's followers. How we love each other. In the book of Romans, the Apostle Paul is given instructions to Christ followers on how we're to live in relation to each other. And he says this simple thing. He says, be happy with those who are happy and weep with those who weep. I mean, it's one of the simplest pieces of guidance in the whole Bible about how to love each other. Be happy with those who have it better than I do, and be sad with those who have it worse. If somebody's happy, get happy with them. And if they're sad, get sad with them. And in order to love like that, I have to make a Spirit-led choice. The choice to be happy for my friend who's in a great relationship or situation when I might not be. Or to be happy for the family that can afford a great vacation, when my family's not getting one this year. Or to be happy for my coworker who receives an award when I feel like I'm consistently overlooked at work. And folks, I don't know about you, but I need God in my life more and more and more, because that's not easy to do. It means rejecting my impulses to compare, the impulse to envy and jealousy. But here's the thing. It doesn't just mean rejecting something and stopping something. It also means starting something. It also means receiving freedom, embracing freedom from the slavery of comparison. Please understand, that's what God wants for you and me in this whole deal. Freedom. Freedom from the anxiety of comparison. Freedom from the fear of not measuring up. Freedom from trying to make myself feel better at somebody else's expense. Freedom to be who we are and be grateful for what we've been given.
For a quarter century, I lived inside a trap, a helpless snare, full of despair. And brothers and sisters, I care. So I wrote these words desiring to share about an amazing gift I was given in becoming aware of this insatiable need I had to compare myself to everybody, everywhere. You see, I had no sense of self. It had been squelched and smothered, comparing my insides to the outsides of others. No matter what your role, no matter what your station or your occupation, everyone I knew became a representation. See, the ones who had less represented my fear, because I looked down there from way up here, but I knew all the stuff I loved, money, wife, house, kids, career, could one day up and disappear. And then maybe I'm down there and Maybe they're up here, and I'd shudder as I fell from the front to the rear, and then it rocked the foundation of my stratosphere. They were a picture of the pain I couldn't bear if I failed. Those weren't people, they were cautionary tales. And those who had more just triggered my resentment, my utter lack of contentment. Outside, I'd smile, but inside, I'd seethe. My desperation to trade places I could barely breathe. I'd look and I'd see all that I'd want to be, completely unaware I'd given them for free the power to determine my identity. They weren't people either. They were just a dangling carrot, and I was nothing but a parrot squawking, "Polly want power, Polly want comfort, Polly need riches and recognition." I was on the wrong mission, this push for acquisition. So losing war of attrition, I was experiencing subtraction in my quest for addition. This sad, sick game of push and shove at its core was a lack of self-love. Deep inside, I believed I didn't count. I knew I didn't amount to much, so don't touch, stay back, keep away. Because if you see me for me, I'm scared of what you'd say. I'm scared you'd go away. Do you feel that way? Do you identify? Do you try to achieve some made-up ideal, less than real, using a protective fallacy, covering up what the good Lord made you to be? You're not alone, my friend. This goes all the way back. People being raised on a foundation of lack. What do you think killed Abel? Cain's need to compare. Why do you think Jacob forged his older brother's body hair? Saul nearly went mad seeing what David got. David's need to compare had his morality shot. King David bedded another man's wife, and then to cover his back, went and took the guy's life. But they saw their failings, they hit their knees, and they cried, "Father, help us, our hearts are open wide." The key is that their righteousness got cast aside, because if there's one sin the kingdom won't abide, it's pride. And his half-brother self-pity. Ain't no vacancies for those guys up inside God's city. We need spiritual exodus. We need a redesigned attitude, the Beatitudes. The sermon that was preached up on top of the mount can shift our hearts and our minds in ways too many to count. It's a simple prayer with conviction, that's all it takes. He'll take your values and he'll flip them like he's cooking pancakes. Because the Son of Man didn't come down to teach us how to behave, he came to save. And to let you know that for the way you've been living, you're forgiven. Then you're gonna open up your eyes and know that you're free, because the Father and the Son and the Spirit, that's all you'll manage to see. And our Savior, and what he did for us at Calvary, and his work up there, to that and nothing else will you ever compare.
The story of Miriam and Aaron is the part of the larger story of the Exodus. The story of the people of God who are set free from slavery and oppression and set out on a journey to the promised land. God had so many good things he wanted for his people to enjoy there, but unfortunately, comparing delayed and detoured their journey. This happened over and over and over again as they compared and complained and doubted God's goodness. And please don't miss this. Their story is our story. We are God's Exodus people. We're set free from slavery to sin by Jesus. Not just so that we can experience a new heaven and a new earth someday, but so we can be blessed and be a blessing today. Helping people find their way back to God is about helping each other experience the Exodus from slavery to freedom, from oppression to victory, from hopelessness to hope. We don't have to be perfect. We need to realize that there's a very special kind of community that we're meant to be. People of faith who don't live in fear. People of hope who don't live by comparing, but with deep gratitude. People of love who rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Today, the challenge is to say, I quit to the comparison game. To deliberately rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. To be set free from comparing and to embrace freedom. May God empower us to be the people and the community he dreams for us to be.